She tore out my solar pump at 10 p.m., smashed it, and dumped it in the lake. All because I refused to pay her HOA's fake fines. This wasn't a violation notice, it was war. And Wendy Norridge, the self-appointed lake queen, just picked a fight with a guy who'd rather burn his cabin down than back down. This is how I took back my property. But it started innocently, just a guy moving into his cabin. I had a truck full of moving boxes, a deed in my glove box, and a dream of finally getting away from the nonsense of city life. After 20 years of condo boards and noise complaints, this unincorporated land was supposed to be my paradise. No rules, no meetings, just peace and a dock to fish off of. I was unloading the last of my things when a golf cart whirred to a stop at the edge of my property. A woman strutted up, arms crossed, with an unmistakable air of someone who thinks the world owes her a thank you card just for existing. This was Wendy Norridge, mid-50s, with a short blonde bob and mirrored sunglasses that hid everything but her disapproval. President of the Lakeshore Crest HOA. "This property falls under our jurisdiction," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You didn't clear this move-in with the board. And this cabin," she said, gesturing to the home I'd built with my own hands. "This eyesore wasn't approved by architectural review." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're out of your mind. This land is outside your HOA. Always has been. I made damn sure before I bought it." Wendy's lip curled into a sneer. "That's what people say when they're trying to skirt the rules. This lake has a standard. We're not letting some random interloper drag it down." She radiated a smug authority, as if her position on a neighborhood committee gave her dominion over the entire shoreline. I stared at her, the reality of the situation sinking in. I'd moved out here for solitude, but I'd landed right next to a miniature tyrant. She had just tried to use the police on a guy moving into his own house, a house on land she had no claim to. I watched her hover by her golf cart like she was guarding Buckingham Palace, and I knew this was far from over. I hadn't just bought a piece of land. I'd bought a ticket to a fight I never asked for. 2 days later, she escalated. She nailed a laminated order to my tree. "Your home is ours now." No vote. No warning. Just her signature, like she owned the land. It was a declaration, a blatant power grab disguised in the cheap plastic of a laminated sheet. The message wasn't just Seasol Construction, it was, "You are not welcome here. This place belongs to me." That's when I knew this wasn't about a cabin. It was about control. I walked it straight back to her front door and knocked. She opened it, a smug smile already on her face, like she was expecting me. "Did you nail this to my tree?" I asked, holding up the sign. "I did," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "The board met last night. We've decided to initiate annexation proceedings. Your property is now under Lakeshore Crest HOA jurisdiction." I blinked, stunned by her sheer audacity. "You decided? That's not how it works. You can't just absorb private land because you feel like it." She leaned against the doorframe, the picture of unearned confidence. "It is when the community votes. We're protecting our values. That cabin of yours doesn't meet aesthetic standards. The dock's not regulation. And your gravel driveway? That's just embarrassing." Her words were laced with a casual cruelty, meant to belittle and intimidate. I stared at her, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, rising anger. "You're out of your depth, Wendy," I said, my voice low. She just smiled, a venomous, self-satisfied little smirk, and shut the door in my face. The next morning, a bright orange sticker was slapped on my mailbox. "Non-compliant structure, fines accruing daily." That was it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some HOA busybody being annoying. This was a turf war, and Wendy Norridge had just picked the wrong guy to mess with. My name's Nolan Price, and I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't file reports. I set trail cams. If Wendy thought I'd back down, she'd learn the hard way. I wasn't just defending my dock, I was digging up her lies. The cameras were camouflaged, motion-activated, and positioned perfectly at the tree line, pointing toward my driveway and the path to the dock. I wasn't planning to catch deer. I wanted faces, license plates, and timestamps. If anyone stepped foot on my property again, I would have irrefutable proof of their trespassing. This was no longer a disagreement, it was an operation. That evening, I drove into town and went straight to the county public records office. It took me nearly an hour of sifting through dusty binders and microfilm, but I found exactly what I was looking for: the original subdivision map from 32 years ago. My parcel was clearly marked, Lot 7A, sitting just outside the shaded perimeter of the HOA's territory. There it was, in black and white, a small note at the bottom of the page: not subject to Lakeshore Crust Association covenants. I made 5 high-resolution copies, used a highlighter to emphasize the clause, and tucked them securely into a folder. I wasn't going to argue with Wendy on her turf anymore. Next time she came sniffing around, I'd put the law in her face. The facts were on my side. Now, I just needed her to give me a reason to use them. I emailed the survey to the HOA. No reply. But 2 days later, 3 people stood on my dock with clipboards. And this time, Wendy wasn't hiding behind a phone. The tallest one turned as I stepped out of my truck. "We're conducting a shoreline assessment," he announced, his tone flat and official. Standard HOA procedure. I didn't even bother to answer him. I just walked back to my truck, pulled the folder from the passenger seat, and marched straight toward them. My boots thudded on the wooden planks of the dock I'd built myself. "You're trespassing," I said, flipping open the folder to reveal the highlighted survey. "This dock is on private land. Not yours, not shared, not subject to your rules. If you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I will call the sheriff and file criminal charges against each of you." The woman in the group took a nervous step back, but the tall guy didn't move. He tried to project an air of authority, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You think you can bully the board with paperwork?" he scoffed. "This isn't paperwork," I shot back, holding the document up so he could read the county seal. "It's a county-verified land record. You are standing on property that belongs solely to me." He glanced at his 2 companions, then down at the dock beneath his feet. "Wendy said this section was being redesignated." "She lied," I said, my voice cold and even. "And when the sheriff sees this and the footage from my trail cams of you on my property, she's going to have a lot more to worry about than dock inspections." They left without another word. That night, I sent a certified letter to the HA's registered office. It contained a copy of the land survey, a formal cease and desist order, and a notice that any further entry onto my property would be pursued criminally. I also emailed a copy to the county zoning department for their records. For 3 days, there was silence. No Wendy, no clipboards, no laminated notices. I almost allowed myself to think it was over. Then, on Friday morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "This is Deputy Langston with the county sheriff's office. I need to speak with you in person. It's about an incident at the lake." When I got to the station, Langston was waiting outside. He looked grim. He motioned me around to the side of the building, away from the entrance. "We've got a problem," he said, handing me a printed photograph. My blood ran cold. It was my dock. Specifically, the brand new solar pump I'd installed for the boat lift. It had been ripped out, wires torn, and was now floating half-submerged in the murky water. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt a pain shoot through my teeth. "When?" "Last night. We got a call from someone down the shore, said they saw a group of people on your dock around 10 p.m. Flashlights, toolboxes, the works. Did your guys catch them?" I asked, a sliver of hope in my voice. Langston hesitated, his expression unreadable. We stopped a golf cart leaving the area. 3 occupants. One of them was Wendy. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. She told the responding deputy they were performing an unauthorized structure removal under emergency HOA authority. I stared at him, incredulous. "They admitted it?" "They claimed you were in violation of shoreline safety codes," he confirmed. "The problem is, the county doesn't enforce those codes on your parcel because the HOA has no jurisdiction there." My voice was low, tight with fury. "So what happens now?" Langston pulled out a second document. "We're opening an investigation into criminal mischief and felony property damage. If we can confirm who removed the pump and caused the damage, they'll be facing serious charges." The moment I got home, I pulled the SD cards from my trail cams. And there they were, clear as day, illuminated by their own flashlights. Wendy and 2 others, tools in hand, yanking the pump loose, tossing parts into the lake like they were getting rid of trash. Their faces were perfectly visible, their actions deliberate and destructive. I sent the footage straight to Langston that afternoon. Within 24 hours, the sheriff's office issued citations to all three of them. Wendy's smug defiance was gone, replaced by the flat, humiliating reality of a mug shot, which ended up on the county records website. Someone from town leaked it to a local Facebook group where it spread like wildfire. I thought I was alone. Then I found 17 neighbors with the same story: $300 fines for blue shutters, threats for bird feeders, ballots lost in the HOA mailbox. Wendy didn't just rule the lake, she owned fear. The phone calls and emails started trickling in after her mug shot went viral. A guy named Marcus, who lived at the far end of the lake, told me Wendy had fined him for painting his shutters a shade of blue she deemed non-complimentary. Another woman, Joyce, a quiet retiree, said she'd been threatened with lien proceedings over a bird feeder she'd had for a decade. I thought I was the only one, she whispered over the phone, her voice cracking.
I set up a meeting at the VFW hall, inviting every non-HOA homeowner and anyone inside the HOA who felt fed up. 17 people showed up. Every single one had a story of unauthorized fees, denied improvement requests, threats of foreclosure, even tampered ballots during board elections. This wasn't just about me anymore. Wendy had built a miniature empire on bluff and intimidation, and for the first time, people were realizing they weren't alone in their fight. One guy, a retired municipal attorney named Ed, came with a binder full of legal documents. He'd served on a city zoning review board for 20 years. "She's been bluffing her authority," he said, his voice calm and methodical. "But if we can prove the HOA overstepped its boundaries, literally and legally, we might be able to dissolve parts of its control, maybe even force a full audit." So we formed a committee, not a rebellion, not a protest, but a legal coalition. We called it CLEAR, Community Legal Enforcement Against Retaliation. Over the next 2 weeks, we became investigators. We gathered evidence, piece by painful piece. Joyce, with her meticulous records, pulled HOA meeting minutes that showed Wendy had pushed through new shoreline rules without the required quorum. Marcus found a document that proved the HOA had collected over $50,000 in environmental maintenance fees that were never spent and never reported to the community. Ed drafted a formal complaint to the County Oversight Board. We filed it alongside a petition signed by over 60% of the residents, both inside and outside the official HOA boundaries. Our request was simple: strip Lakeshore Crest HOA of its lakefront management privileges and initiate a forensic audit of its finances. We didn't expect a response for months. It came in 5 days. The county board issued a temporary injunction. Effective immediately, the HOA was prohibited from enforcing any rules, collecting any fees, or initiating any actions concerning lakefront properties. A formal hearing was scheduled for 30 days later. The following morning, someone had duct-taped a giant sign to Wendy's prized golf cart. It read, "Lake Queen no more." She didn't come to the next HOA meeting. Neither did her 2 co-conspirators from my dock. And when the hearing finally came, it wasn't just about my dock or their trespassing. It was about years of abuse, manipulation, and fabricated authority. The county board ruled decisively. The HOA's management of the lakefront was officially revoked. They were barred from collecting any further fees, and their past financial records were turned over to the state attorney's office for investigation. As for my cabin, I added a new sign to the tree by my driveway. Private property, no trespassing, not part of any HOA. Underneath, I added one more line. Bring a clipboard, and you better bring a lawyer. 3 weeks after the injunction, the lake was quieter than it had been in years. Without Wendy's patrols and clipboard squads, a sense of calm returned. People started fishing off their docks again. Kids paddled around in kayaks without the fear of laminated violation notices being stuffed into their parents' mailboxes. One family even repaired their old boathouse, a beautiful structure Wendy had previously declared aesthetic pollution. But that peace was just the eye of the storm. It didn't last, not after the auditors arrived. 4 state investigators showed up in 2 unmarked sedans, slipping through the community in polo shirts and sunglasses. They spent the first day at the clubhouse, a building most of us had never been allowed inside, collecting boxes of HOA financial records. By the second day, they were knocking on doors. One of them, a sharp woman named Marisol, came by my cabin.
"We're following up on the complaint your group submitted," she said, her gaze direct. "We're particularly interested in the Environmental Maintenance Fund. Can you confirm whether any improvements were made to shared infrastructure using those funds in the last 5 years?" "They haven't touched a thing," I said. "The only thing they maintained was their power." Marisol scribbled something on her notepad. "Power. They used those funds to keep the electricity and air conditioning running in the clubhouse, but no one had access except board members. The rest of us weren't allowed to rent it, use the dock, or even sit on the benches out front." She paused. "And you're certain of that? You can ask anyone on this side of the lake. Most of us didn't even know where the funds were going until this year." Marisol nodded once, thanked me for my time, and walked back to her car. That was the last time I saw her, but the fallout came fast. 3 days later, an unmarked box truck rolled up to the HOA office. 2 men in matching khakis carried out boxes of paper files and computer hard drives. Wendy was nowhere to be seen. Her house sat dark most nights, her golf cart parked in the garage with a flat rear tire. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, something changed. I woke up to the sound of tires grinding on my gravel driveway. A black SUV sat idling at the end of it. A man in a dark suit stepped out, popping open an umbrella. I met him halfway. "Nolan Price?" he asked. I nodded. He extended a business card. "Assistant District Attorney Caleb Marin. We've got a warrant to execute on a private residence inside Lakeshore Crest," he said. "I understand you've been involved in the ongoing investigation. You're going after Wendy?" I asked. He glanced toward the road. "We believe there's more here than financial misconduct. Someone in the HOA administration submitted forged environmental reports to the county. We're looking at potential fraud exceeding $200,000. My stomach dropped. "You're saying she faked environmental reports?" "Not just her," Marin said, "but she signed them. And that makes her accountable." That afternoon, half the neighborhood lined the sidewalk as county investigators and 2 uniformed deputies searched Wendy's home. They emerged with a locked file cabinet, a laptop, and several folders marked private. One of the deputies taped a seizure notice to her front door. By sunset, the rumor mill was in full swing. Someone claimed Wendy had paid her nephew, who wasn't even a licensed contractor, to write a phony erosion report. Another neighbor said the HOA had used that report to justify a one-time emergency environmental assessment on residents, pulling in nearly $9,000 in a single summer. The next morning, the sheriff's department issued a public statement. Wendy Norridge was under criminal investigation for fraud, falsification of government documents, and misuse of community funds. But it got worse. The audit turned up something no one expected: a private, off-the-books bank account. According to the investigators, over the past 4 years, the HOA had funneled maintenance fees into this secret fund. That fund had been used to pay for consulting services, legal defense retainers, and security patrols. Yet, there were no invoices to match the expenses. And the name on the account? Wendy's husband, Peter Norridge, a man who hadn't even lived in the state for 2 years. By the end of the week, the state attorney filed felony charges. Wendy was arrested at a gas station 30 miles away, trying to board a bus headed west. Her new mugshot hit the news that night. The photo showed her in a wrinkled raincoat, her eyes wide and unfocused. No sunglasses, no clipboard, just a woman realizing the empire she'd built was crumbling beneath her. The next HOA meeting was held in silence. The few remaining board members quietly resigned by email. The county announced a full dissolution of Lakeshore Crest's HOA charter. It was over. The letter from the state attorney's office might have closed the legal case, but it cracked open something deeper in the community, a hunger to know just how far Wendy's corruption had gone. I didn't expect to be pulled back in. But then a teenager named Tyler knocked on my door one Saturday morning, holding a dusty gym bag. My dad worked for the HOA, he said nervously. He quit after the audit, but this was in the attic. He said you'd know what to do with it. Inside the bag were 5 old mini DV tapes. Each was labeled security cam, lot dispute, dock confrontation, board private, and 2 with only dates. It took me all afternoon to get an old camcorder working, but once the first tape started playing, my stomach turned. The footage showed Wendy in a private meeting, discussing a plan to deliberately misfile property boundaries for lakefront lots, shifting maintenance costs onto non-board homeowners. One of them even laughed, saying nobody ever checks the old plots anyway. The second tape was worse. It showed 2 men in hooded sweatshirts removing official county survey markers in the middle of the night. One of them wore a jacket with the HOA's logo. I didn't watch anymore. I called Deputy Langston. By Monday, the tapes were in the hands of the county prosecutor. Tyler's father gave a sworn affidavit, and within 48 hours, a grand jury was convened. They charged 2 former board members with criminal conspiracy to manipulate property records. This wasn't just about an overreaching HOA anymore. They had actively altered legal property lines, a felony. The county clerk's office launched a full resurvey of all lots bordering the lake. The results were staggering. At least 6 property owners, including Ed, had unknowingly paid thousands over the years for land maintenance that wasn't their responsibility. Joyce, with her neat records, produced a letter from 5 years ago where Wendy had pressured her into moving her fence back to conform with a non-existent community shoreline alignment. The new survey proved her original fence line was correct. The prosecutor's office contacted every homeowner affected, adding them to a civil restitution lawsuit. A judge ordered an immediate freeze on the personal assets of the 2 former board members and approved a lien on Wendy's property. The Lakeshore Crest HOA charter, already gutted, was officially dissolved by court order. Not suspended, not restructured, dissolved. Its bank accounts were closed, its authority erased. The old clubhouse was turned over to the County Parks Department and opened to the public for the first time in years. A group of local teens painted a mural of a giant blue heron across its faded beige walls. As for Wendy, her plea deal didn't protect her from the new felony charges. She was rearrested and sentenced to 18 months in county detention, with 5 years of supervised release and a permanent, statewide ban from serving on any housing authority or board. The morning her sentencing was announced, someone placed a single folding chair at the end of the public dock. Taped to it was a laminated copy of the county's dissolution order. Nobody claimed credit. Nobody needed to. Over the weeks that followed, the lakefront transformed. People started reclaiming their spaces, not with fences, but with picnic tables and open porch lights. People who've lived next to each other for years without speaking now shared stories and tools. I finally met my neighbor Ben, a former Coast Guard mechanic. He helped me tune up my fishing boat, and I helped him build a rack for his canoes. One evening, as we sat on the dock, Ben looked out at the water and said, "I never thought this place could breathe again." I nodded. It just needed to exhale. The cabin, once a target, had become a landmark of sorts. Neighbors dropped by, not for permission, but for conversation. The county held a community celebration at the newly opened clubhouse. I walked past the bulletin board on my way in. The old HOA logo had been replaced with a hand-painted sign, "This is your lake. You don't need a permit to enjoy it." I didn't stay late. Back at my cabin, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter across the water. I sat on the bench I'd built, the same one they'd once tried to remove, and let the quiet settle around me. No more laminated threats, no more fake authority. Wendy's gone. But her legacy? Every time you see a laminated notice on a tree, remember, they only have power if you let them. So next time, don't back down. Take back your home. The best revenge isn't winning. It's making them realize they should never have started the war.